The Hunt for Gollum, everything we know about the upcoming Lord of the Rings movie. What if I told you that we are finally returning to Middle-earth? But this time, the story isn't about Frodo destroying the One Ring. It's not about Bilbo finding it. And it isn't even about the rise of Sauron. Instead, we're going hunting. Hunting for Gollum. The Lord of the Rings, The Hunt for Gollum is the next major live-action Middle-earth movie, and after years of announcements, speculation, and casting news, production has finally begun. But what exactly is this movie about? Who's coming back? Why is Andy Serkis directing? And perhaps most importantly, can a new Lord of the Rings movie possibly live up to Peter Jackson's legendary trilogy? Let's take a look.
A Hunt for Gollum update, first of many that we'll do, little blogs along the way, and Andy Serkis has been busy designing the film. He's going to direct it and obviously play Gollum.
1. What is The Hunt for Gollum? First, let's clear up the timeline. The Hunt for Gollum isn't a sequel to The Return of the King. Instead, the story takes place between the events of The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. That means Middle-earth is in a very interesting period. Bilbo has already returned to the Shire. The One Ring is now in the hands of Frodo. And somewhere out there, Gollum is desperately searching for the precious object that has consumed his life. The title gives away the central idea: Gollum is being hunted. But this isn't simply going to be a chase through the mountains. Andy Serkis has described the movie as both a physical hunt for Gollum and a psychological hunt into the character himself. And that's potentially the most interesting thing about this entire project. Because we know Gollum. We know what happens to him. We know how his story ends. But there are still parts of his life and psychology that the original movies never explored. And that gives this film an opportunity to show us a different side of one of Tolkien's most tragic characters. 2. Andy Serkis is back. Now here's where things get really exciting. Andy Serkis isn't just returning as Gollum. He's directing the movie as well. For Lord of the Rings fans, that is a pretty huge deal. Serkis has played Gollum since the original trilogy, creating one of the most iconic motion capture performances in cinema history. And after more than a decade away from the character, he's stepping back into the role. Warner Brothers has already released behind-the-scenes footage showing Serkis back in the motion capture suit. And honestly, he still looks terrifyingly comfortable as Gollum. The footage shows him dropping into that familiar hunched posture and instantly finding the character again. It's almost like no time has passed. And Serkis himself has said that Gollum never really left him. That's important, because this movie is going to depend heavily on that performance. Gollum isn't simply a monster. He's Sméagol. He's a victim, a villain, a survivor and, in many ways, a warning about what the ring can do to someone. If anyone understands that character, it's Andy Serkis. 3. The original Lord of the Rings team is returning. But Serkis isn't doing this alone. Peter Jackson is back as a producer, alongside Fran Walsh and Philippa Boyens, the creative team behind the original Lord of the Rings and Hobbit films. Walsh and Boyens are also involved in the screenplay, alongside Phoebe Gittins and Artie Papagiorgio. That doesn't mean Peter Jackson is directing. He isn't. But having so many members of the original creative team involved could give this movie a connection to the previous films that other Middle-earth projects simply don't have. And that's probably exactly what Warner Brothers wants. Because when audiences hear the words Lord of the Rings, they immediately think of Jackson's Middle-earth. The music. The landscape. The costume. The creatures. The massive battle. And, of course, those unforgettable characters. So the question is whether The Hunt for Gollum can feel like a genuine part of that cinematic universe rather than simply another movie using the Lord of the Rings name. Elijah Wood is returning as Frodo Baggins. And Lee Pace is back as Thranduil, the Elven King from the Hobbit films. But there's one major change. Aragorn is being recast. Viggo Mortensen is not returning in the role. Instead, Jamie Dornan is playing the younger Aragorn, or, as he's known during this period of his life, Strider. That's a fascinating choice. Because Aragorn in this story isn't yet the king we remember from The Return of the King. He's a mysterious ranger traveling the wilds of Middle-earth. And that gives Jamie Dornan the opportunity to play a very different version of Aragorn. One who is still living in the shadows, still hiding his true identity, and still discovering exactly what his destiny will become. 5. Some very big new names. The film is also bringing several new actors into Middle-earth. Kate Winslet has joined the cast as Sméagol, while Leo Woodall is playing a new character named Halvard. And Anya Taylor-Joy has been cast as an elf named Saren.
I feel very fortunate that feels very lucky. Yeah, I can't wait to be a part of Middle-earth.
That's particularly interesting because these aren't characters from the original movies. So while the film will bring back familiar faces, it isn't simply going to recreate scenes we've already seen. There are going to be new characters and new parts of Middle-earth to explore. And that could be exactly what this franchise needs. 6. The movie is finally in production. Here's the biggest update of all. The movie is now filming. Production officially began in July 2026, and Warner Brothers has already shown the first footage of Andy Serkis returning as Gollum. The footage even takes us back to New Zealand, with the mountains and landscapes immediately reminding fans of Jackson's Middle-earth. Because for a lot of people, Middle-earth isn't just about the characters. It's about the feeling. It's those enormous New Zealand landscapes. It's Howard Shore's music. It's the practical costumes and detailed production design. It's the sense that you're watching a real history unfold in a world that existed long before the characters appeared on screen. Whether The Hunt for Gollum can recreate that magic remains to be seen. But at least the production is heading in that direction. 7. When does it come out? So when can we actually see it? The current theatrical release date is December 17, 2027. So we've still got a considerable wait. And that's probably a good thing. Because a Lord of the Rings movie shouldn't be rushed. The original trilogy became famous partly because of the enormous amount of work that went into creating Middle-earth. If this movie is going to work, it needs that same level of attention. 8. Can it live up to the original trilogy? And this is the big question. I'm excited about The Hunt for Gollum, but I'm also cautious. Because the original Lord of the Rings trilogy is one of those rare cinematic achievements that is almost impossible to replicate. So this movie shouldn't try to be another Fellowship of the Ring. It shouldn't try to recreate the same story. Instead, it needs to embrace what makes Gollum different. This should be darker, more intimate, more psychological. A story about obsession, about addiction, about what happens when a person becomes completely consumed by the thing they desire most. And if Andy Serkis can bring that emotional complexity to Gollum while the filmmakers recreate the atmosphere of Jackson's Middle-earth, we could have something genuinely fascinating. Not another Fellowship, not another Hobbit, but a completely different journey through Middle-earth. So, The Lord of the Rings, The Hunt for Gollum is officially on its way. Andy Serkis is directing and returning as Gollum. Peter Jackson, Fran Walsh and Philippa Boyens are back behind the scenes. Ian McKellen and Elijah Wood are returning. Jamie Dornan is taking on the role of Strider. And new stars like Kate Winslet and Anya Taylor-Joy are joining the adventure. Production has begun. And the movie is currently scheduled to arrive in cinemas on December 17, 2027. The biggest question now isn't whether we're going back to Middle-earth. We are. The question is, what will we discover when we finally go hunting for Gollum? Let me know in the comments. Are you excited for this movie, or do you think Middle-earth should have been left alone after the original trilogy? And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more Lord of the Rings news and movie updates. Until next time. Namari.